All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Crane, and I am the Programming and Community Engagement Manager at the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. The Center for Creative Entrepreneurship is tasked, and what we are working on is developing business resources for the creative industries. So we put together webinars, boot camps, networking events. We connect people where we are building an e-learning platform that will have an educational system, a career marketplace, and a project management tool. Lots of exciting things happening. So please check out cceglobal.org and see what we're doing. Today, we're really excited to bring in Nicole from Arc Artists to talk about what's going on in the musician booking world. All right.
Hello.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah, it's shocking.
That's awesome.
I'm an Instagram
Well,
noob,
thanks for
so
yeah. Oh, please don't worry about it. Thanks again for taking time to talk to us today.
yeah, thanks for having
Um,
me.
and I think to get right into it, a lot of musicians, obviously we start out, we play in bands, we try to book our own tours. And as musicians' careers grow, that question of starting to find, a talent agency or a booking agency to work with, what are some of the things that you look for in an artist that you think that an artist really needs to pay attention to, in terms of, if they want to, be on your roster or someone else's roster? Like, what are some of the important tips that you would have, for bands or musicians or artists who are growing their career?
Sure. So I think number one for us is we definitely want to work with artists that are hungry for career growth. Communication is really key for us. So talking to artists that have, a vision for where they want to be, 2 or 5 or 10 years down the line. We like to see that enthusiasm and that want to grow. In a more tangible side of things, for us, we want to see that artists have had some tour history in some of the major markets across the country. So, for us, if we're beginning to work with an artist that hasn't played Boston or New York, for example, we're going to probably struggle just as much to find those opportunities that they would if they were working on their own. So, typically venues will ask what was their last play in this market, just to get a sense of what their draw might be. So it's helpful for us if an artist has, even a shorter list of just places that they've played in the past, but hitting some of those big markets, so that we have momentum to work off of.
Right. And, do you look at, social numbers? Like, how many followers does someone have? Do you have access? I mean, you probably don't have access to their sales, but, what are some of the, other things that you look at? I mean, do you look at that stuff, I guess, is the question.
Yeah,
I'm curious. I'm curious about that, because,
And I'm probably,
so many people can pump their numbers a little up, and it's like, how relevant is that? Because I feel like, nowadays, that's a big thing. It's like, oh, they must be, legit because they have X amount of followers, or they
right,
must, so I'm just curious what
right.
that looks like from your perspective.
I'm probably not the best person to ask considering my entry into this live chat. But it is something that we look at, and I think particularly, especially after the pandemic, when like everything artists are doing is virtual and online, having a large following is going to be really important for us in terms of booking and in terms of what venues are looking for. I see it as kind of an added touch. So, if an artist has played that market, we can also say, hey, they also have, this many followers, and of those followers, this many are in Atlanta or whatever market we're trying to get them in. I think in terms of, Spotify numbers or whatever streaming service they're on, iTunes, it's kind of helpful for us sometimes to do a little bit of digging to see where people are listening. So again, if they have a lot of listeners in Atlanta, that can be a really helpful tool for us to say, okay, there's a good chance that if we were to book a show for them in Atlanta, that they could get a good chunk of people out there. So, so yeah, I would say it's, mostly venues are looking for past ticket history, and that is something that we gather over time with artists that we're working with. We like to kind of keep track and watch that growth and see how many numbers, how the numbers are changing over time. But certainly having the followers as an added bonus of like, hey, when this artist comes to town, these are the numbers of people that they can reach out to ahead of time to promote the show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, pandemic hits, live music is, gone to a halt.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any silver linings for you guys, or some things that you discovered, or maybe some new revenue streams, or I think everyone had to shift their business models or adjust or just closed up shop, and that's what a lot of people did, and then kind of ride it out. So were there any things for artists that you guys were able to kind of discover, or
Yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, we were super lucky. I think silver lining for us is just improved communication. I think it gave us a chance to, communicate more closely with the artists on our roster on a personal level, even just kind of figuring out how they're doing, how the pandemic has affected them creatively. It's been really fun for us to watch them create during this time, get in the studio and make new music. I think from a creating a tour perspective, it's in a lot of ways, it gives us sort of a second chance to rebuild a tour period that maybe, the first time around when we booked it in 2020, maybe there was a date that didn't quite fit the way that we wanted it to. It gives us a chance to really retry, to plot things in the calendar in a way that makes more sense for the artist. And I think us as a team, we've kind of found ways of lifting each other up and staying in touch and reminding each other to, keep our eyes ahead and try and think outside the box. And that's something that's, for me at least, has been really inspiring about the music industry, is just watching, venues totally revamp what they're doing, doing things outside, doing things virtually, and kind of watching the ecosystem of the industry kind of pull together and just find new ways of doing the things that we love doing.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, and I'm curious of kind of like where things are going to go from here. Obviously, venues have taken a big hit. Budgets have been kind of slashed. I know from a local level, when people are asking for gigs, the money's kind of low. And I don't know if you're discovering that as well. But how do you see kind of the future of touring? I mean, do you think that a lot of artists are going to incorporate a lot of live streaming while they're on tour? Have you talked with other artists about that? Have you thought about that with your own organization? I'd be curious.
Yeah, so I think the landscape's definitely changing. I think a lot of venues are going to try doing like a hybrid model where they're, selling normal tickets in person, but then they might have, a lower ticket price to tune into a stream. And that might be a great way to generate some extra revenue that they couldn't do before. I think in terms of, I think we're fortunate. Our roster of artists have been really flexible and patient, and our understanding of the fact that venues are struggling, and budgets are going to be different. Venues are trying to figure out, how do we get the same income without overdoing the ticket prices so that our audience can't afford to come anymore. So I think there's going to be some growing pains probably in the next year, just trying to figure out how to balance those factors to make sure that everybody's covered. But again, for us, that just means, thinking more creatively again. So, trying to book a festival date that we feel comfortable will be a solid budget. And then, sneaking in the club dates that are really important, but, understanding of the fact that they might be a little lower paying. I think it's just going to be, again, about communication and really trying to talk closely with the venues and with the artists to say, hey, this is where everybody's at. Where is there room for us to, to give a little bit.
I like what you said too, when I asked about silver linings of, that you were able to connect with your artists, connect as a team. I think that morale booster is such a essential part, of success. Instead of like, well, what's the revenue? Like,
Yeah.
being able to take a step back and connect with your own team and connect with the artists. It's great. Like it gives you the chance to move forward even stronger than before.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of people, in the music industry, have had to rely on their peers and the people that they've worked with, to kind of stay and keep their head above water. Um, One other thing I wanted to ask you about was, a lot of, so, the music market's a global market, right? Because of technology, we can listen to music from all over the world. How would you, suggest for an artist, to break into, an international market or to tour in an international market, right? So like, that's a big investment, and so, hey, I toured a bunch nationally, but I feel like I'm getting a lot of hits in Berlin. How do I create a sustainable tour? Just curious.
Yeah. So for us, we've sort of built out a team. We found that agents that are based in Europe or specifically in France, they have a really great pulse on what those specific markets look like. So we found it really helpful from our perspective to team up with agents who are abroad, to kind of work together on getting the starting points for some of the artists that we're working with. I think obviously the live streams are things that can go internationally if people want to broadcast them that way. So that's a great way to get attention. And then I had one more thought I was just going to say. I'll think of it. I had one more. I had one more point. Now I just lost it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just, I think, for a lot of musicians, right, when you're coming out of, school, or you're starting your career.
It just came to me. It
All right,
just
go
came
ahead.
to me. Sorry.
Yeah, hit it.
Another great way to do that, I think, is to pair up with an artist who, open for an artist that is touring regularly internationally. So, that's a great thing to do, in the US as well, is if you're trying to break your way into a market, pairing up with an artist that's played there before and doing either a co-bill or a support slot. That's a really, really great way to get in front of a lot of people in a market that you've never played before. So I think internationally, we find ourselves reaching out to agents about artists that we think could pair really well with the artists on our roster, and just say, hey, we see that this artist has a European run coming up. Are you looking for any added support on that? That's kind of a nice way to get your feet wet in a new market.
Yeah. That's great. That's great advice. So moving forward, right? We were talking 2022 is almost already booked.
Yeah.
What, for your industry, how are things looking just in general?
I mean, we're feeling optimistic. I think the days of the 2-week run for this coming year might be a little bit more limited, just because venues are booking a little bit more last minute right now, because a lot of them are just finding out this week or last week that they're going to be able to have shows again. So things are definitely coming in more last minute than we're used to. So I think what that means for us is maybe we'll focus in on really targeted weekend runs or things like that, where we can really focus in on the best possible venues for an artist, and maybe keep that to a shorter weekend, rather than doing a long stretch on the road. I think that might be good for our artists too, to just get their feet wet back into the world of touring. And I think in terms of festivals and things like that, it's going to be a little tricky, just because not only are festivals trying to reschedule their 2020 lineups, but they might have gotten 2021 canceled now as well. So there's going to be a little bit of a backlog, I think, in terms of those kinds of opportunities. But for us, it just means reaching out earlier, getting conversations started with those promoters and saying, hey, I know you're booked up this year, but if there's any wiggle room, let us know. If not, we'd love to stay in touch for next year. I think it's going to be the year of thinking ahead to next year, probably, which I think we've all been doing for a while now.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
Um, and then, we also talked a little bit about kind of, our contract's going to change. Like, I mean, I think there's an event happening in the city where people have to show that they've been vaccinated, right? Like, how I can imagine that can be very difficult, and it has to be a discussion between you and the artists, like, and the venue. Like, do you have protocols in place? What is, you know, what some people won't. Some people will be like, we're fine, it's good. Some people will be
Hmm.
like, yes, we do. Um, I can imagine that being, and then even like, God forbid someone on tour does, catch COVID or something like that. Like, what's the protocol for that? What are those discussions like? Because I think this is, going to be kind of a permanent thing for a while, right? I mean, obviously it's not going anywhere. Hopefully more people will become vaccinated. But in terms of, dealing with that with artists, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think again, it kind of goes back to communication. So every artist is going to feel a little bit differently about
Mm-hmm.
the types of gigs they want to take, or if they want to get back on the road right away, things like that. So for us, having a clear line of communication with the artist and with the venue, I think a lot of venues are kind of coming out with sort of one sheets of what their protocols are looking like. What does it look like in their green room? How frequently are
Mm,
those spaces getting cleaned? Are they requiring artists to wear masks backstage? So I'm finding that a lot of the venues are actually really prepared when it comes to that. And they communicate with us ahead of time so that the artists know what they're going into ahead of time, which is really helpful. And then for the artists, as far as they're concerned, we don't want to put them in any situation where they're going to feel unsafe or uncomfortable. So that's up to us to kind of keep that communication going as we get closer to the date. There's certain language we might be using in contracts, sort of laying out, should, 1 month out, should there be variants of the pandemic or things like that.
right.
We are putting good faith out there that, we can reschedule these things, and that nobody's going to hold the other party accountable when it's really something that's out of our control. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think just the communication piece, I think, is going to be very, very key. And yeah, we're putting trust into everybody that, everyone's doing their part and making sure everyone's safe. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think, when I was programming for the Pier, for Navy Pier,
Mhm.
what's nice about our industry is that everyone wants it to work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there may be some outliers here or there, but in terms of, those protocols and venues and stuff like that, I can imagine that everyone wants this thing to get back to, full capacity as quick and as safe as possible. Um, but yeah, in terms of, all the variables, there's just the reality of that we're not in control of everything.
Right.
It's, and that's always like the the X factor. It's like we can do all of these things, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I think
Yeah. Thanks for
we're
having me.
we're in a really hopeful time and unique time where venues are opening back up, festivals are happening. You guys are able to book artists again. Shout out to Marquise Hill, big fan of his playing. Also, I think you have Basil's on your roster
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
but
Yeah. They
he's
have a
awesome.
show. They have a show coming up at the Epiphany Center on
Yeah, yeah,
May
that's right.
15th, and it's Basil's birthday too, so it should be a good
Oh, that's
time.
awesome. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you told me about that. I might try to make that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Um, but yeah, and everyone that's listening out there, check out Arc Artists. They have a fantastic lineup of artists. They obviously, from talking with Nicole, you can tell that they communicate with their artists. They talk with their artists. They're a small, intimate, but yet I think very efficient group to work with. So
Thanks.
check them out. We hope everyone is staying safe, and we can maybe have a little bit of fun this summer, and hear some live music. I think I know I'm excited about that, and we wish everyone a great rest of the week and weekend. And Nicole, thanks again
Thank
for
you.
joining us. All right,
Thanks.
everyone, take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.